Good evening and welcome to the Weymouth and Portland Neighbourhood Policing Team online event. My name is David Palmer, the Inspector for the Weymouth and Portland Neighbourhood Policing Team. I'm joined here by colleagues of mine, Sam Goom, Sergeant from the team, and also Chris Mead. And we also have Ian Cook here from the Antisocial Behaviour Team. We're going to be online for the next half hour or so, depending on how successful this is. Talking about some of the work that the Neighbourhood Policing Team does, along with our partners, and answer any questions you have. I invite you to post your questions in the comments section, and then they'll be put up on the screen there, and we'll go through them. Just introduce the team to you then. So Sergeant Sam Goom and Sergeant Chris Mead, they're in Weymouth here.
Hi.
Say hello. And to bring a bit of glamour to the proceedings, we've also got Ian Cook here with us from the Antisocial Behaviour Team.
Thank you. Good evening.
So what I thought we'd do is we'll start off this evening with a chat about some of the things that are going on around Weymouth and Portland, some of our statistics, some of the work we're doing, some of our priorities, and then we can also then pass you over to Ian. He can talk about some of the work the Antisocial Behaviour Team's doing, and also Sam and Chris can join us, and then we'll do some questions. But as I say, if you've got any questions at all, pop them in the comments box and they'll come up on the screen and we can work through them. So Weymouth and Portland is divided up into 17 beat areas. Our busiest area at the moment is Melcombe Regis, which is lovingly referred to as DWDA. It's the town centre code. It runs from the town centre along up Dorchester Road, and that's our busiest area. About 25% of our crime and antisocial behaviour occurs in that area, and that does rise during the summer months to sort of 30–40%. So it's our busiest beat area by far out of the 17. So overall, the crime statistics in Weymouth show about a 19% reduction since last year, and antisocial behaviour is down by about 9 to 10% down overall. Certain areas have got a higher reduction. Melcombe Regis in particular is down by about 25% on crime, about 17% on antisocial behaviour. But what we found in that area is a lot of that is connected to COVID and the lockdowns. And so we've seen a big reduction in the town centre and around nighttime economy zone. And there has been quite a concentration in the northern part of Melcombe Regis, for example, around Lennox Street and the streets that run off of that, which is why the Weymouth and Portland Neighbourhood Policing Team have identified it as one of our priority areas. So we're doing a lot of intensive work to try and support the community to reduce the crime-induced antisocial behaviour. The police won't police lead on the behavioural side of it, but policing alone isn't going to solve all the problems in that area. So we've identified that we really do need to work in partnership with agencies such as antisocial behaviour teams, such as housing, and our charitable partners, the Lantern, Julian's House, to really look at the problem in a lot of detail and come up with a variety of solutions. Policing is only going to be one strand of that. So this event this evening is an opportunity to talk in more detail around our antisocial behaviour work primarily, but we're also open to questions about general policing and looking at our other priorities such as demand reduction and county lines work as well. But really we're here to talk tonight about the antisocial behaviour. So it's a priority for the team. It's a priority that we work in partnership. It's a priority for us to also look at performance and how the teams operate to make sure we get best value for money out of our team, and look at the ways in which we can protect the public. So some of the things we might do is put overt patrols, targeted patrols out into our key areas, such as Melcombe Regis, where we're seeing the spikes in antisocial behaviour, to make sure we've got a presence on the ground. But we can't be there all the time, so we do work in partnership with CSAS to make sure we've got some sort of visible presence in the area as much as we can. A key role for the neighbourhood policing team is also around targeted enforcement. So that could be through community protection warning notices, community protection notices, criminal behavioural, or CBOs as they're often known, enclosure orders such as the one under Section 76 of the ASB Crime Policing Act, where we can enforce a partial closure or a full closure and eviction of a person from a property if they're causing a lot of antisocial behaviour in the area. And that's where the neighbourhood policing team will work hard on to identify the people that are causing the most problems and come up with the most robust and most appropriate solution to try and deal with that problem and try and suppress that demand, solve the problem, or at least reduce the problem to an acceptable level. A lot of our work is as I say, in partnership, and it's a problem-solving sort of mentality that comes with the neighbourhood policing team to make sure we identify the problems and come up with a package of measures Some of them will be police-led, some of them may be partner-led, to make sure that we're really engaging, supporting the community, identifying the problems, and coming up with some solutions or suppressing the problem as best we can. So we've got a real shared responsibility amongst our partners to make sure that we're focused in the right way. We also use covert patrols as well as our overt patrols. So we may be out, you may not see us, well, that's the aim of it anyway, in unmarked cars or out on foot in plain clothes, so that we can use those tactics to intercept where we know we might have a problem with, say, drug dealing or antisocial behaviour. We can get much closer in a covert capacity. One of the teams we also run in Weymouth is the County Lines team. So we do a lot of disruption and support towards vulnerable people who may be targeted by organised crime, also known as county lines drug dealing. So there's a wide range of work that we get involved in. And I say a big, strong emphasis on partnership and problem solving. That's our sort of main aim around the neighbourhood policing team. So I'm going to pass you over to Ian Cook now. He's going to talk about the role of the council's antisocial behaviour team. And he's also going to talk about some more of our partnership work and some of the stats that we're quite proud of around our successes within Weymouth and Portland. As I say, if you've got any questions, any comments, pop them in the comments box and we'll get them up on the screen and answer them. You know, we want this to be an interactive opportunity so we can all discuss ASB in your community rather than just a front-loaded presentation about what we're doing. You know, feel free to ask us some questions and let us know your comments. Thank you. Here's Ian Cook.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I manage the community safety team in Dorset Council. That's primarily around antisocial behaviour. So we're two fronts, really. We've got an antisocial behaviour officers who are dealing with complaints about antisocial behaviour. That could be anything from a neighbour dispute to helping the police around obtaining criminal behaviour orders, identifying properties for closure, all that sort of thing. We could do injunctions against individuals who are causing harm to our communities. And then the other part of our work is the community safety patrol officers, and you'll see those on the streets of Dorset every day of the week. Today, freezing cold, they've been out there dealing with people causing antisocial behaviour on the streets. You know, if you are a regular in Weymouth, you know who they are, you've seen them, you'll have seen our officers working with the police, working on their own to deal with the problems of street-based antisocial behaviour. That's primarily street drinking, moving people on. We can take alcohol from them. We can do a range of interventions, signposting them for help, because these people have got complex needs. They're human beings like the rest of us, and the reason they're on the street is because of specific needs, and so we're trying to work with them to address those needs. And like Inspector Parr has said, that's around working in partnership. Antisocial behaviour is not solved by just the police, by the council. It's by working together alongside other organisations like social care, children's social care, early help, the Lantern Trust, homeless outreach, housing. Everybody's got a role to play in tackling antisocial behaviour. The interventions we use, nobody leaps into enforcement. So we have an escalation process, and that's, well, pre-COVID, that would be somebody like me knocking on the door and saying, hey, we've had a report of antisocial behaviour, pack it in. Simple as that. I can't do that now because I'm stuck at home. But it is about, maybe a phone call, a warning letter. That might be enough to stop the antisocial behaviour before it escalates anywhere else. If that fails, then we can begin to use things like accepted behaviour contracts, a voluntary contract, point out to people what they're doing, stop it, let's move on. We use community protection, which is notices, which is part of the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act, and that's a warning process, and then a formal notice that says stop this, do that, or there could be consequences for you. And those consequences are a fine. You could finish up in the magistrate's court being prosecuted. You could finish up with a criminal behaviour order. Criminal behaviour orders are obtained largely through the Crown Prosecution Service, or they can be done by the local authority on the back of a prosecution for breaches of the public protection notices, public spaces protection notice, and so on. If that fails, then the other tool in our box is an injunction, where we can apply to the county court and ask somebody be injuncted from stopping a certain behaviour, and then we can try and add some positive measures in that. Attend drug and alcohol treatment, get an assessment from CMHT about your mental health, about your anger problems, whatever mitigating circumstances somebody might have. And in terms of antisocial behaviour in Weymouth, for my team, we cover the whole of the county, the whole of Dorset Council, sorry. But the bulk of our work is around the Weymouth area. The bulk of our antisocial behaviour complaints come from Weymouth. And they stem from around some of the street-based antisocial behaviour I've talked about. And they come from neighbours who have got issues with each other, problems with youth nuisance in open spaces. You might use places like the Marsh and large open spaces like that, which are popular with teenagers. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes when kids get together, some problems can follow. And that's not every young person gets involved in that sort of behaviour. And sometimes it's around, again, their vulnerabilities and working with children's services to protect them from harm. Because when they're out at night, unattended by parents, you know, they can get involved in all sorts of things that we wouldn't want them to. So again, that's in terms of stats. I don't want to bore you to death with that, but the largest amount of antisocial behaviour, I've said, is in Weymouth, and believe it or not, that's increased a bit during lockdowns, and some of that is around neighbours because they're rubbing up against each other, and maybe they might play a bit of loud music, they might have a bonfire, they might park their car inconsiderately or whatever, and the other is around there are more of our street community around. They are more high profile because there are generally less people walking around, and that's generating work for all agencies in Weymouth. So if you've got any questions around the council and what we do about the antisocial behaviour issues, then please let us know.
Thank you, Ian. We've got quite a few questions coming in, thick and fast. We'll work through them all. I think we've got a question around the orders that we use and how we target the ASB. Sam, Chris, do you want to answer the question?
Hi, yes. What is the question specifically then?
What other orders do we use to combat antisocial behaviour? So we've talked about the CBO. You might, I don't know if you've got the stats around CPN, CPWs, and what we're doing with those, but it's sort of what other things we can do around that in terms of orders is a question that's on my screen.
Okay, so the pathway we follow for antisocial behaviour can start with the CPW route, so the Community Protection Warning Notice, which tells people, identifies to them their behaviours out of order, causing antisocial behaviour. And what we find is a majority of those served then improve their behaviour, and we don't have to go to the next stage, which is a community protection notice. And once they have the notice, if their behaviour continues, we again find that less people commit antisocial behaviour after that point. So then after the community protection notice, we're left with a smaller amount of people, sort of a harder core, and we target those and usually take them to court to obtain a CBO, which then will restrict their movements and behaviours quite substantially in the area that they're causing the problems. There's a variety of other pieces of legislation that we can use. One such is a closure order if a premises is repeatedly coming to notice for persistent antisocial behaviour. And in that case, we record, we research, detail all the instances of antisocial behaviour over a period of time, and then we go to the courts and ask the magistrates to award us with a closure order. We were at court today, and we obtained a closure order for an address in Lennox Street today. So that address has been closed for a period of 3 months. Any person found inside that address would be arrested. So that's just an example of one of the extra additional pieces of legislation we can use.
Excellent. Got another question coming around the seafront, so the Esplanade area. It's asking, is it an actual alcohol-free zone? Sam or Chris?
Yeah, I can take that one. So the seafront is covered by the PSPO, Public Space Protection Order. It is not a blanket ban on alcohol consumption, which I think is an area of confusion. It basically gives us and our colleagues in CSAS a power to require an individual to stop consuming alcohol should they be acting in an antisocial manner. And we can also require them to seize and surrender any alcohol they have as part of it. It's not a piece of legislation that we use on a regular basis. We find that other powers that we as the police have are more effective, such as the Section 35 power, which I think Sam will talk about a little later. But that power actually allows us to move individuals from an area. And we find that much more effective at present than the PSPO. So the question, whether it's an alcohol-free zone, simple answer, no. Otherwise, everybody who's on the seafront wouldn't be allowed to drink, or likewise in the town wouldn't be able to drink. And that's unfair to those that are behaving and enjoying themselves.
So moving on to that, I can see the next question is about what is a Section 35. So we can answer that on the back of what Chris was saying there. So Section 35 is a piece of legislation under the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act. It's a bit wordy, but what it allows officers, police officers and PCSOs to do in uniform is to restrict someone from a certain area, disperse someone from a certain area for a certain amount of time if they are involved in antisocial behaviour, alcohol-related disorder, that kind of behaviour. It allows us to remove someone from an area for up to 24 hours. If they don't leave the specified area after being served with the notice, they commit an offence which makes them liable to arrest. So there's short piece of legislation which we can use in the immediate instances of ASB. And then we use those service of those notices against persons, we compile them and use them as evidence towards the bigger piece of legislation, such as the CBOs and the CPNs. So it's a sort of an immediate piece of legislation that we can use. It's very effective.
So the Section 35, as Sam said, it's a really great way of dispersing a problem. It gives us that tool in the short term to disperse a problem out of an area where they're causing an issue. It could be linked to crime. So if we've got someone who we know is a persistent shoplifter in town, we could disperse them out of the area during the opening hours of the shops so that they can't commit crime. But more often than not, it's targeting antisocial behaviour. To have a Section 35 authorised, it needs to be an inspector like myself or one of my colleagues has to consider the necessity, whether it's a proportionate response to a problem. If we're happy that it is, we can authorise a Section 35 for up to 48 hours, and then officers can then use that power at their discretion to target people that they think are or have been involved in antisocial behaviour. The power then extends on Section 37, which allows us to require someone to surrender items that might be used in connection with antisocial behaviour or crime. So that could be alcohol, it could be a sound system. If they're playing music late at night, having a party on the beach, we could surrender the sound system in Section 37. So it's a really good, useful tool for the police to use to target the problem. And I know sometimes when we say about it on Facebook that we've used it, we get comments about Groundhog Day and why it's just repetitive and all we do is just move people around. It isn't that case. As Sam says, the power is good in the short term to deal with a problem, but it isn't a long-term solution. But the repeated use of Section 35, the repeated use of PSPO powers allows us to build that evidence to show the persistence of a problem. So when we move to court to ask for a CBO, we can evidence that we have tried to stop this person from affecting and impacting the community through various means, and now we need a CBO from the court. If we just walked into the court on day one, asked for a CBO against someone because they've been drunk in town once, it's very unlikely we're going to get it. We need to show that escalation process, and throughout that escalation we also need to show that we've offered them support and tried to engage them with drug and alcohol services, with mental health support, with housing, poverty charities, to support them and try to help them not commit crime or commit social behaviour. But we've got to this point now where we can do nothing else but ask the court to give us quite a stringent order that could last 3 years against someone. That means if they walk into an area, King Street or the train station or up onto Esplanade, just a simple act of being there means they're going to get arrested and potentially sent to prison. It's a very heavy power to use, and we can only do it once we've shown that escalation process. So it may seem like Groundhog Day, but actually it's about building the evidence, short-term support for the community, but also building that package of evidence as well to make sure we can get our CBOs when we apply for them, which is why Weymouth and Portland is so successful. When we apply for CBOs, we generally are successful through the courts. Was there another question about CBOs? Actually, I don't know if Ian wants to take this one. There's a question from, I think it's Debbie in Chickerell, one of our great areas of Weymouth, Portland. How long does it take to get a CBO in place for someone? How long does it take?
Oh, how long's a piece of string? Obviously, there's antisocial behaviour has to be taking place. Somebody has to be arrested for a crime, and they have to be found guilty of that crime, and then a CBO can be applied for in court. The court likes information of the behaviour going back around 6 months. We can use further back to substantiate what's been happening, that it's a long-term problem and it's long-term behaviour. So we're looking at about 6 months worth of intelligence and criminality and antisocial behaviour, and then we can ask the court to award it on being found guilty. Sometimes the courts will adjourn after the guilty verdict, and so that could be another month or two before the CBO is awarded. So, and again, we're in strange times, aren't we, where nothing is as it was a year ago, and courts are delayed. Solicitors are asking for adjournments. It's delays built into the system. So it can be from the first point of application, we could be talking quite a few months now. But in normal circumstances, if we ever get back to normal circumstances, they can be done quite swiftly. And the other mechanism that we could also use is under the antisocial behaviour powers is an injunction, which we could probably get into court a little quicker. But again, the county courts are busy, so we're looking at when significant harm is caused to a community or an individual, then we can act quicker, and injunctions might be an alternative in those circumstances.
Thank you for that. I think we've got some live questions. I think, Kirsty, you've got to fire some questions up. Oh, that's a long question. Well, Pammy Joe has asked, why can it take ages to get through on the phones? I rang around tea time once, was waiting on the phone for 45 minutes, listening to the recorded options, press 2. So I don't work in the control room, but I'm aware of some of the issues they've faced around that. So our 999 response, I presume when you were waiting 45 minutes, it wasn't for a 999 call, I would hope. 999 response is very good. Nationally, I think it's above the average. I don't know the exact stats, but if it's something that you're interested in, I will find out and we'll post them up on our Facebook Weymouth and Portland site very soon once I've got them confirmed. The data is logged, so they can tell us exactly how long the average call time wait for a 999 or a 101 call. So in regards to 101, my knowledge of it, and again, it's not my area of business, but my knowledge is that there are only so many call takers that can answer calls at any one time. There are peak demand times when we get higher amounts, and the staffing is geared towards that, so we make sure we have the most number of people on at the most number of times. The problem with the 101 calls is they can be very different. Some calls can be very, very quick, and they can be answered and dealt with very quickly. Other calls can be very complicated. If they're talking about something like a fraud that may have occurred with an elderly victim, they could be a call taker could be on the phone 45 minutes to an hour, not only criming that, but also arranging support, liaising with family, liaising with support charities that might be available, and making sure we assist that victim as much as we can. We don't want to rush the calls. We need to give them the time they need to make sure they resolve that problem at the first point of contact, and that unpredictability can mean that at times that there are simply no call takers available to answer the calls, and therefore people will have to wait. So if you get a busy period and it just happens to be that we've got a lot of long calls going on at the moment, people will have to wait, and sometimes those waits can be significant. We always do our best to answer it as quickly as possible, and would also make people aware that if they can, to use other services, like online reporting is a great tool where you can basically send like an email in essentially into the control room. We can then deal with that and task it out to an officer or a contact through the neighbourhood policing team or through frontline territorial policing. So there are other options available, other ways to report. It doesn't have to come through 101, which at times will be busy, and at times there's just no one is available. Obviously, going through COVID over the past year, the control room, like many other departments, have had problems with staffing where staff have gone ill. A lot of the control room staff work together, and so if there is a COVID scare or a case of COVID within the office, it can affect the staffing, and we'll pump as many staff as we can into it, pay overtime to prioritise the 999 calls and the 101s, but there will be times when demand just outstrips capability, and so people will have to wait. I can only apologise for that, but we'll get the exact stats up on Facebook for you once we have them.
Yeah, boss. If I can just add on to that, one of the important things about 101 and all the other reporting methods is that you do report it to us. You might think it's a minor thing, or what's the point? But all the times you report to us, that all gets logged, and we use all that information. So there's a whole variety of ways you can report it to us online. There's an email account so you can do it to. There's an online form. There's a whole range of different ways to do it, which you can do at your convenience instead of sitting on the phone for 101 all the time. So just have a look on our website. We can put the website address up and all that in a moment, just to remind everyone. But it's a really good way of doing it at your convenience, really. If it's not an emergency, you can report it to us at your leisure, but please do report these things to us. Chris will explain the benefits and why we do that now.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, reiterate that message. Even if you think it's something minor or we're not interested, we are. Information that we get in via emails, via the online part of the website, all that information feeds into our record management systems, and it's that information that we use to direct our patrols, identify those hotspots. So I'm sure most of the people watching this evening will be aware of the 100 Days of Summer, which we've run over the last 2 years, and the hotspots that we've identified as part of that initiative have been based on the calls, the emails, the data that comes in, which allows us to identify those areas where we need to be focusing our patrols, our officers at key times. The information that we get, we can present it in a number of ways and view in a number of ways, such as heat maps and obviously graphs and etc. And I think an example of the heat map will be coming up shortly. But again, it just allows us both a visual way of seeing what's going on in the areas, make sure we're targeting our resources in the right place at the right time, as I said earlier. I'm not sure if we'll get that heat map or not. So, boss, if I hand back to yourself.
Thanks, Chris. There's another question about whether or not we get frustrated by people moving 200 yards when we move them on. I presume this is in relation to dispersal notices, section 35. Sam, let's say I can't say I do because I'm very rarely down there, but Sam or Chris, can you tell me how you deal with people in town?
We get as frustrated as the public. The thing is, what we can see is that we're working towards that person being dealt with and being held accountable for their behaviour. So the public might see them being moved, but we've got that recorded. We have to move them again. We've got that recorded. If we have to move them again, we've got that recorded. And then at the point where it tips, we can go to court and we can demonstrate. We keep moving them. We keep moving them. They keep causing antisocial behaviour. They keep causing antisocial behaviour, and we get that CBO, which then bans them from the town centre, for instance. And if they come back, they get arrested. They choose to behave in that manner, but we will continue. And it is frustrating, but we know that eventually it will tick over, and the courts will award us with the orders that we seek. So yeah, we play the long game. I know it must be frustrating for the public to see the same people acting in social behaviour, but we do take them through the process, like we said, the CPNW, the CPN, and then the CBO. It's all about gathering that evidence, and in the short term, we use the section 35s, like we've said before. So yeah, it is really frustrating, but there's nothing more rewarding than going to court and getting a CBO at the end of it, which removes them from the town centre.
Thank you. So another question coming up. Is it going to come up on the screen about speeding vehicles? I think there was a question around Radipole Park Drive in particular, but here you go from Mr. Wigley. Can you do anything regarding the speed of vehicles along Radipole Lane, especially by the schools? There's going to be a terrible accident. Thank you. Yes, Sam, Chris, do you want to talk about speeding vehicles? Obviously, we have enforcement powers, territorial policing do, and our partners within No Excuse and the road safety teams. There's lots of options there available to us. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, we can do. I mean, speeding is everybody is responsible for their own speed, and we look at it in the where the reports come in. So again, we'll go back to that. Just make sure you report your concerns to us. They go into the No Excuse and the road safety teams, and they initially look at those calls, and then they send them to us. We pay in the neighbourhood team. We pay particular attention around schools and community places and places where obviously the public are on foot a lot more. Obviously schools is one of those, and we do random checks around the schools and speed checks. We work closely with some of the community groups because we have a community speed watch that also go out and do the check-in, and those reports that you make to us, they form the basis for the speed cameras that we have also to go out and do speed checks in Weymouth and Portland. So yeah, please just call it in and we can look at it. Thanks.
Great. I think there's still questions coming in thick and fast. It's, we just pump another up on the screen when we're ready. Shady Johnson, thank you for your question. I walked along the seafront last Thursday and there was a group by the bus shelter drinking. Two officers walked past and didn't say a word. Why was that? I don't know exactly why that would have been. I wasn't there. I can assure you I wasn't one of them either. So, as I said, in relation to the PSPO, the Public Spaces Protection Order, people are allowed to drink on the seafront. It's not a straight out and out ban. In relation to COVID, there are enforcement powers around groups, and if the behaviour is antisocial, then we can also look to have a section 35 put in place so that we can then disperse them from the seafront. I don't know exactly what they were doing, but just being on the seafront drinking isn't necessarily going to be something that we would need to take action from. We would look at that, the whole range of behaviour and what's happening in relation to that. But as I say, PSPO isn't just a straight no alcohol zone. But I don't know what the officers would have been committed with at the time. Any more questions, Kirsty? I was just going to bring one up on the screen, pre-record it with. So there's a question here in relation to does someone have to have a CPN before they have a CBO? So Ian, do you want to jump in on that one? That's sort of your area of expertise. Do people have to go down the escalation route, or can we just jump straight in at the CBO if necessary? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, okay. We've mentioned criminal behaviour orders, CBO. You need to be convicted of a criminal offence to get a CBO in the first place. So it's not a tool that can be used as such in an emergency. The CPN route can have so community protection notice. That could have two routes. One is a route that we go down jointly with the police. Reached, that becomes a criminal offence, and a prosecution will follow. And if the behaviour warrants it, we could ask for a criminal behaviour order. Another route on the CPN is the local authority issue a £100 fine. If that fine's not paid, then we can prosecute the person. The court can then issue a fine, or again, we could ask for a criminal behaviour order on the back of that prosecution. So there's alternatives when a community protection notice has been issued on what route we're going to take. So again, it's all around what Inspector Parr's talked about before around harm. What harm is being caused? What's the threat and the risk to people? And how quickly do we need to act? And what piece of legislation do we all have as a partnership? It could be that they're in a housing association property where tenancy legislation could be brought in, where people could ultimately, ultimate sanction, you lose your home because of your behaviour. So there's alternatives, and we don't necessarily need to follow one route. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I got a question coming up around, I think it's around smoking. Danielle Taylor, thank you for your question. I live in a no-smoking apartment complex, and my neighbour likes to partake in weed. I believe people can do. I believe people can do what they like, but it's affecting as it smells vile and comes through into my flat. What can I do? Sam, I believe this is it's a regular issue that is raised with the police. Neighbour policing team have an involvement with it. Territorial policing, our frontline officers have an involvement as well. But Sam, do you want to talk about some of the stuff that we do in relation to that?
Absolutely. So it's a very common call to us about people smoking cannabis in their residence or in their gardens, and it wafting over into residents, neighbours, flats, etc. The best advice I can give is to come to us with it. There's a variety of different things we can do to help. If you're living as a tenant in part of a housing association complex, we can work with them to speak to the neighbours, resolve it. Depending on the severity and what we know about the person who is smoking the cannabis, so there can be a door knock, there can be other punitive action taken. It might be that bit of information just fits a jigsaw puzzle for us, and everything clicks into place and is result in something a bit more substantial. So the best advice I can give is just come to us, let us know, and then we can talk to you about what we can do to support you.
Thank you for that question, Danielle. We've had several questions this evening about e-scooters, and I know, Sam, that's something you've been working on at the moment. So do you want to talk to us about e-scooters? I know we put a post out recently on Facebook that attracted quite a lot of comments and attention. So let's talk about e-scooters. Let's get it all on the table.
Okie dokie. Right. E-scooters are legal to purchase, but it is against the law to ride a privately owned e-scooter in any public place in the UK. That includes roads, pavements, parks, anywhere, the Esplanade. It is illegal. That's because they're classed as personal light electric vehicles. So they're treated as motor vehicles in the eyes of the law. And as such, they're subject to the same legal requirements of any motor vehicle, any car on the road. So if you're using it, you could find yourself with fines for no insurance, such as if you drove a car with no insurance. We're trying to take a common sense approach to this with advice to people, because most people have bought these without really understanding what the legislation is and what it means. So there's a lot of advice going out at the moment, and we are using a warning system for people that we stop and have a conversation with, and if people consistently use it in places of high traffic, such as the Esplanade or down pavements, etc., they'll find that that we will take action against them. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. I think there's a question coming up on the screen around about Portland Skate Park from Paul Martin John. Thank you for your question. Portland Skate Park has groups meeting at night, drinking, etc., often causes disturbance later in the evenings, as well as youth meeting during the daylight hours. Yes, Portland Skate Park. We were working with Portland Town Council. We were keen to keep the place open. Unfortunately, the groups were meeting in such high numbers that it was becoming a problem around the COVID legislation. We looked at options as to whether or not we could put a sort of a dividing fence down the middle to create kind of two smaller skate parks to divide the groups and put small numbers on there, but it soon became unworkable, and so Portland Town Council made the decision to close the skate park. The neighbourhood policing team, as well as our frontline officers, are regularly down there as much as we can be, in amongst all the other calls that we're getting at the moment. We also, Dorset Police has a dedicated COVID response car. It's called Operation Tattoo. We have officers working a day and a late shift across the east and the west of the county, and we could deploy them out to various areas if we get reports of COVID breaches as well. Very busy team. I think last week they dealt with over 376 reports of COVID breaches across the county, and obviously they're our lead on issuing fixed penalties. The stats show me that from March to January we issued over 1,000 fixed penalties, and then from January this year to now over 200 have been issued. 40% of them are to non-local people, so the majority are to local, but there's still too high a number going out to people. And I know some of the times we've been down to skate park where other skate parks have been closed around the area, people have come down to Portland to use that facility, and they've travelled some quite inappropriately long distances to get down there. So the team does go down there regularly. We will patrol it as much as we can. We can also link in with the Op Tattoo car and other colleagues from around the force to make sure if you are seeing groups down there, they shouldn't be there. COVID says no groups. It's also closed at the moment, so let us know, report it through to the control room, and we can task someone down there, either Op Tattoo, COVID car, or neighbourhood policing, or one of our territorial policing partners down there. So it is an issue, and that goes the same with all across the county area. If you're seeing breaches, let us know. We have officers in place that can deal with that, and we are going out robustly dealing with them. We use the 4 E's approach about engaging, explaining, educating, but it's been around for a long time now. We shouldn't need to be telling people and educating them about COVID and the legislation. So we are moving much more into an enforcement process now to deal with people, especially if they're persistently or blatantly breaching or coming into the county from long distances away to come to Dale Door or walk on Weymouth Beach. It's completely inappropriate. You need to be exploring from your door, stay local in order to protect lives, save the NHS, and the messages that I know we're all very familiar with now. Any other questions? Kirsty, who's doing my questionings, or are we all wrapped up for now? I think we're all done. Yeah, I believe we're all done. So that's all the questions. So we'll host another online event. I think it's gone fairly well. We'll post another topic up around it, but as I say, we're here. If you have any questions, you have any issues, feel free to email into the team, email the control room 101, get in contact with us, stop us and have a chat while you see us out on patrol. You should see a fairly heavy presence around Melcombe Regis at the moment because it's one of our priority zones. Have a chat with us about the team. Most of us are very friendly, and we like to have a chat with people, obviously socially distanced, and we'll talk to you all day long about some of the things we're doing, about the initiatives. If we had more time tonight, I could have talked to you all night about Operation Luscombe, which is a plan we've got for the summer around how we're going to do escalating enforcement process coupled with support through our partnership work, and some of the other great partnership work we're doing around housing and support in relation to homeless people. police will take the lead on the behaviour aspects, but we do need to influence around the social aspects as well to make sure we have that maximum impact and around that rounded problem solving through our partnership work. But by all means, get in contact with us and let us know if you've got an issue that's affecting where you live. Let us know, and we'll try and do something about it to help you out here. I'd like to thank you all for your questions and your participation this evening. We had some great questions, some interesting debate thrown at us. It's been great fun. I've enjoyed it. Thank you for Sam and Chris for supporting us. Thank you for Dom and Kirsty in the background firing the questions up and distracting me with the multiple screens I'm having to look at. Thank you, Ian, as well. Thank you, Ian, for joining us, and Paula as well from media in the background. I hope you've enjoyed the event. I say we'll try and host them fairly regularly, especially as at the moment we can't get and do as much face-to-face engagement as we would like to do because of COVID. So we're looking for other ways, like these online events, where we can still interact with the community. Let us know what your issues are, and we'll let you know what we're doing about them. But thank you for your time tonight.